Have you ever wondered why the Pharaoh of Egypt was so stubborn, even in the face of divine wrath? Today, we're setting our sights on the book of Exodus, a chapter of biblical history that paints a vivid picture of a leader's defiance and a people's struggle for freedom. In this tale, we're introduced to some of the most iconic characters of biblical lore. Moses, a prophet chosen by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. The Pharaoh, a monarch of immense power, who refuses to relinquish his slaves, and God, the omnipotent force, who guides Moses and punishes the Pharaoh for his obstinacy. The narrative of Exodus is brimming with tension, miracles, and divine interventions. But the question that lingers at the heart of this story is one of human nature and divine will. Why did Pharaoh, time and again, refuse to free the Israelites despite the dire consequences? Today we delve into the book of Exodus and seek answers to this age-old question. Our journey begins with the birth of a simple Hebrew child, Moses. Amidst the reeds and rushes of the Nile, a baby's cry pierces the silence. His mother's heart, heavy with fear, finds solace in a tiny wicker basket as she sets her beloved son adrift in the mighty river. Destiny, however, had other plans. The Pharaoh's daughter, bathing at the river's edge, is drawn to the infant's cries. Overcome by compassion, she defies her father's decree and adopts the Hebrew child as her own, unknowingly nurturing the seed of a prophet. In time, young Moses grows into a prince, yet a nagging sense of unrest stirs within him. The truth of his humble origins and the plight of his people gnaw at his conscience. He is a Hebrew at heart, a realization that rocks the very foundations of his royal existence. And so Moses, a prince of Egypt, was set on a path that would change the fate of an entire people. Driven by a divine encounter, Moses accepted an impossible task. The tale of Moses' encounter with God in the burning bush is one of profound significance, a moment that would forever alter the course of his life and the destiny of his people. In the solitude of the wilderness, Moses stumbled upon a bush ablaze, yet not consumed by the fire. From this burning bush, God himself spoke to Moses, a voice as captivating as the spectacle before him. This was no ordinary conversation, no casual chat over a cup of tea. This was a divine command, a call to action from the creator of the universe. God said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering." He revealed his plan to Moses, his chosen instrument, to free the Hebrews from the iron grip of Pharaoh, the mighty ruler of Egypt. But Moses was apprehensive, filled with self-doubt. How could he, an exile, stand before Pharaoh and demand the release of the Hebrews? But God reassured him, "I will be with you." These words, simple yet powerful, were enough to dispel Moses' fears. For when God is with us, who can stand against us? This encounter underscores the importance of faith and obedience. Moses, despite his initial reluctance, chose to obey God, to place his faith in him. He didn't let his fears or insecurities hold him back. Instead, he stepped out in faith, trusting in God's promise to be with him. This is more than just a historical event, it's a lesson for us all. When God calls, he equips. He doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. With the voice of God in his heart, Moses returned to Egypt, determined to free his people. This burning bush experience ignited a flame within Moses, a flame of faith and determination that would guide him in the daunting task that lay ahead. And so begins the epic journey of a man armed with nothing but faith against the might of an empire. The Pharaoh's heart, however, was as hard as the stones of his pyramids. In the heart of ancient Egypt, a monumental power struggle was playing out. On one side stood Pharaoh, the living god of his people, whose authority was as unyielding as the Nile. On the other was Moses, a humble shepherd chosen by the God of the Hebrews. Moses, armed with divine mandate, demanded Pharaoh to let his people go. But Pharaoh, with his heart as cold as the desert night, refused. He would not be dictated by a shepherd, nor would he bow to a god he did not know. His defiance echoed through the grand halls of his palace, a stark contrast to the pleas of the enslaved Hebrews. A series of confrontations ensued, each more intense than the last. Moses, with God's power, performed miracles that defied the natural order. He turned his staff into a serpent, he transformed the Nile into blood, but each miracle was met with unflinching obstinacy. The Pharaoh's heart remained unyielding. The struggle between Moses and Pharaoh was not just a battle of wills, it was a battle of beliefs. Pharaoh was the embodiment of the ancient Egyptian civilization, a civilization that believed in multiple gods, in the divine right of kings. Moses, on the other hand, represented a new monotheistic belief, one that spoke of a single God who cared for all, including the lowly slaves. In this cosmic chess game, God sought to show his power, not just to Pharaoh but to the whole of Egypt. Each miracle was a challenge to the gods of Egypt, a demonstration of his supreme authority. But Pharaoh, in his pride and arrogance, refused to acknowledge this power, clinging instead to his own earthly authority. The stage was set for a showdown. The tension was escalating. The stakes were high. Would Pharaoh yield to the God of the Hebrews? Or would his defiance lead to a cataclysmic consequence? The heart of the Pharaoh was as hard as stone, but even stone can shatter under enough pressure. Despite the miracles performed before him, Pharaoh's heart remained unyielding. And so the land of Egypt was struck with 10 devastating plagues. These were not just random acts of destruction, but rather a calculated demonstration of God's power and a direct defiance of the Egyptian pantheon. The first plague turned the Nile River into blood. This was a direct affront to Hapi, the Egyptian god of the Nile. The life-giving waters of the Nile, upon which all of Egypt depended, were transformed into a river of death, undrinkable and unyielding of life. Following the blood came the plague of frogs. Heket, the Egyptian frog goddess of birth, was mocked as frogs multiplied uncontrollably, invading homes and lives with their incessant croaking and slimy presence. The third and fourth plagues saw lice and flies swarm the land, a direct challenge to Khepri, the scarab god, who was associated with creation and rebirth. Instead of life and renewal, these insects brought disease and discomfort. The fifth plague struck the livestock, a hit to Hathor, the cow-headed goddess of love and protection. Cattle, considered sacred by the Egyptians, fell ill and died, shaking the very foundations of their belief system. Next, boils and sores afflicted the people, a jab at Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and disease. Despite her supposed powers, she could not protect the Egyptians from this horrific affliction. The seventh plague brought hail and fire, a mockery of Nut, the sky goddess. The heavens, once a source of comfort, now rained down destruction upon the land. Locusts descended upon Egypt in the eighth plague, eating every plant and crop left from the hailstorm. This was an affront to Seth, the god of chaos and storms, who was powerless to stop the devastation. The ninth plague drowned Egypt in darkness for 3 days, a direct challenge to Ra, the sun god, the most revered of all Egyptian deities. His light, the symbol of life and warmth, was smothered, leaving the Egyptians in cold, unending darkness. Finally, the 10th and most terrible plague took the firstborn of every Egyptian family. This was a blow to Pharaoh himself, considered a god who could not protect his own child, let alone his people. With each plague, the cost of Pharaoh's stubbornness grew, yet his heart remained hardened. Each act was a powerful statement, a divine challenge to the Egyptian gods. Yet despite the suffering and devastation, Pharaoh's pride and arrogance blinded him, leading to the ultimate downfall of his kingdom. Finally, with the death of the firstborns, Pharaoh relented. In the heart of the night, the wails of mothers echoed through the stone halls of Egypt. The firstborn of every household, from the lowly servant to the Pharaoh himself, had been struck down. The final, devastating plague had come to pass. And so, Pharaoh, once an unyielding rock, crumbled under the weight of his grief and released the Hebrews from their chains of servitude. With their freedom gained, the Hebrews hastily prepared for their departure, gathering their belongings, their livestock, their children. Their hearts were heavy with the sorrow of leaving a land they had known for generations, yet filled with the hope of a promised land flowing with milk and honey. Under the leadership of Moses, the Hebrews embarked on their journey, leaving behind the great pyramids, the mighty Nile, and the memories of their bondage. Yet, as they ventured into the vast desert, they found themselves pursued by Pharaoh's chariots, their newfound freedom threatened. But the Hebrews were not alone in their journey. God, who had heard their cries of despair, who had unleashed the 10 plagues upon Egypt, was with them. As they reached the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in, they found their path blocked by the vast, uncrossable expanse of water. Yet with a stretch of Moses' hand, a miracle unfolded before their eyes. The sea parted, creating a path for the Hebrews to cross, while the Egyptian soldiers were swallowed by the returning waves. The Exodus, as this dramatic departure came to be known, was more than a physical journey. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of a people yearning for freedom, a testament to their faith in a God who would not abandon them. It was a display of divine intervention, a clear message that oppression could not suppress the will of the divine. Thus the Hebrews were freed, led by Moses under the guiding hand of God. At Mount Sinai, the liberated Hebrews received the law from God. This marked a pivotal moment in their journey, a turning point that would shape their identity and destiny. Imagine the scene, if you will. The Hebrews, once enslaved, now stood free, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Above them, Mount Sinai shrouded in a thick cloud, a physical manifestation of the divine presence. Amidst thunder and lightning, a profound silence fell, and then God spoke. His voice, powerful and resonant, echoed through the mountains, delivering the 10 Commandments. The first 4 commandments established the Hebrews' relationship with God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, and remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. These commandments define the exclusive devotion the Hebrews must have for their God and set the rules for their worship. The remaining 6 commandments define the moral obligations among the people themselves. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And you shall not covet. These laws, in their essence, underline the necessity of a just and harmonious society. The 10 Commandments weren't merely a set of rules, they were a covenant, a sacred agreement between the Hebrews and God. By accepting these laws, the Hebrews entered into a relationship with God, one that demanded their loyalty and adherence to His laws in return for His protection and guidance. This event, the giving of the law, marked the formation of the Hebrews as a nation. Not a nation defined by territorial boundaries, but a nation bound by a shared faith, a common understanding of moral and ethical conduct, and a divine law that would guide their actions. And so, a nation was born, bound not by land, but by a shared faith and a divine law. This was the moment the Hebrews truly became the people of God. It was the birth of a nation, the birth of a faith, the birth of a legacy that continues to influence the world today. The book of Exodus is a story of faith, liberation, and the power of divine providence. As we've journeyed through the chapters and verses of the book of Exodus, we've witnessed the profound narratives that have shaped generations. We've seen the birth of a prophet, Moses, and his divine call to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt. We've delved into the stubbornness of the Pharaoh, a man whose heart was hardened against the pleas of a people yearning for freedom. In this story, divine interventions are a constant and powerful force. God, through Moses, unleashed 10 plagues upon Egypt, each a testament to divine power and a warning for the unyielding Pharaoh. The waters turned to blood, frogs covered the land, darkness fell, and ultimately the firstborn of Egypt were taken. Each plague a clear sign of divine displeasure, yet the Pharaoh's heart remained unyielding until the end. Then came the Exodus, the monumental escape of the Hebrews from the shackles of Egyptian oppression. Guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, they crossed the Red Sea, witnessing the divine power that paved their way to liberation. This journey was not just a physical one, but also a spiritual passage from slavery to freedom, from despair to hope, and from oppression to nationhood. The climax of this journey was the giving of the law, a divine code that would guide the newly liberated nation in their covenant with God. The 10 Commandments, given on Mount Sinai, became the foundation of their faith and their society. In revisiting the central question of why the Pharaoh's heart was hardened, we find that it serves to magnify the glory of the divine interventions and the ultimate liberation of the Hebrews. It is a testament to the power of faith and the strength found in obedience to divine will. In the end, the story of Exodus teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming oppression, faith and obedience to divine will can lead to liberation and nationhood.